rent to own, owner financing, how does somebody decide which one's better?
Great question. The answer is it depends on who you are and what your situation is. However, we're going to do a little bit of a more objective analysis here. And we're going to talk about each thing as we go through it.
Let's deep dive.
We're going to deep dive. So if you haven't watched our videos on rent to own or owner financing, you might want to study up on that because we're not going to get too far into it in this video. Essentially, rent to own, you're putting about $10K down and you're going to buy yourself a 5-year option period where you can get approved for financing, permanent financing within that 5 years. Owner financing, you put about 10% down or more, and then you get approved right then and there for the financing, and you just get right onto a 30-year fixed interest, no prepayment penalty, no balloon amortization schedule with a loan. It's not always those exact terms, but for the sake of this video, that's what we're going to do. So, the application process, which one's easier to apply? Owner financing, you're going to need usually 12 months of bank statements or last 2 years of tax return, whichever reflects the greater amount. They also are going to pull your credit, not because credit matters when doing owner financing, but so that they can confirm that you have the ability to repay the loan and that your liabilities do not outweigh what you're making every month. You need to be able to show to the underwriter that, okay, I can afford to own this home, and I can prove that with my income and then with my credit report, which will show all my liabilities every month. Rent to own, all you need is the $10K option fee, and all you need is a few months of pay stubs, bank statements, and show that you can basically afford the rent payment that's there, and you're in. So, short term, that's what this stands for. Short term, the rent to own is going to take the cake here. You can get into it super easily without having to have 12 months of bank statements, without having to have 2 years of tax returns, without having to have a big underwriting on your debt to income. As long as you know you can afford it and you can show some pay stubs, then this is a great option, usually for people who might not have 12 months worth of bank statements, but maybe have 6 months worth of bank statements that show that they're making good enough money to afford the rent to own. Now, the thing with rent to own is, once you've been renting during that 5-year period, when you're ready to execute your option, you're going to have to go through an application process to get approved for that permanent financing, whether it's owner financing or from a traditional bank. So long term, it's actually more beneficial for you and easier to go with the owner financing. And so we would probably agree that overall, if you can get approved for owner financing right out the gate, then it's better for you overall to just do owner financing. And it's better long term if you do owner financing, whereas in the short term, it's much easier to get into a rent-to-own property. You need less down, you don't need to go through as rigorous of an underwriting, but in the long term, you're ultimately eventually gonna have to do that. So if you're in a place right now where you can show the 12 month bank statements, you can get 10% or more down, then owner financing is gonna be better for you. If you're in a situation where maybe you don't have all of that stuff, then maybe it's good to start with a rent to own and convert it to owner financing when you get there. Affordability, which one is more affordable? Well, again, it's gonna look very similar. The rent to own is gonna cost far less to get into right up front. There's no closing costs. All you have is your option fee, potentially a security deposit, and first month's rent. So that's a very small amount as opposed to owner financing where you're gonna need to bring 10% down, and then there's going to be an underwriting fee, and then there's also going to be closing costs. So again, in the short term, rent to own is going to be much, much cheaper by tens of thousands of dollars usually. It's a great option to get into if you've got $10,000 and a security deposit and first month's rent, but maybe you don't have a full 10% down. Very easy to get approved for. Long term and overall, I would actually still say that rent to own is going to be more affordable, at least on the closing cost side. However, with owner financing, you get ownership right away. And what that means is you're going to get that $40,000 off of the purchase price, and then every month that you make payments, you're going to actually have the principal balance be reduced by a little bit each month. So long term, you're going to save way more money by starting with the owner financing, even though up front it's very, very expensive compared to rent to own, you're gonna save way more money because you're gonna own the home. You're not gonna have to pay rent. You're gonna get paid down every month. So overall and long term, again, owner financing takes the cake because you're getting paid down every month and you're building equity in the property as you continue to make payments on it. Where with rent to own, you're just renting until you can get permanent financing through owner financing or traditional bank loan. It's basically a means to the end that you're seeking for. Appreciation, what's better for appreciation? With rent to own, the way you capture appreciation is with your option agreement. It locks you in for 5 years. As markets appreciate, you're gonna go and capture that appreciation from the seller who kind of gives that away. They might put an average appreciation of 2 or 3%, where actual appreciation is about 8% or something like that, 5%. So it still gives you appreciation by doing rent to own. However, it doesn't even come close to owner financing. Right off the bat, you're gonna have appreciation in the home because you got equity pay down right away, and every month you're gonna be paying down the equity in the property as well. So no matter how you spin it, owner financing is going to capture more appreciation for you in the long run and the short term. And then ownership. What conveys better ownership? Well, again, I would say rent to own, while a great option for people, it's not going to convey you ownership, full ownership right away. You have a lot of perks. You can do renovations on the property, you can do additions as long as they're legally permitted. You can do a lot of things. You can even go sell the property for more than your option agreement is for. However, you are not the legal owner on the deed. So owner financing, again, while being much more expensive up front, it's going to give you ownership right away. So even in the short term, you're gonna have full ownership. In the overall, full ownership, long term, full ownership. Rent to own is just partial ownership, essentially, perceived ownership, as what we say. It's a great option again, but it's a means to an end to eventually get to the owner financing place that you want to be, or to getting permanent financing through a traditional lender. So I think we can conclude that it would be better to do owner financing for everybody. If you can get away with owner financing, you should definitely pursue it because you're gonna get pay down on your equity, you're gonna have immediate and full ownership of the property. There's a lot of perks to doing that. The only downside clearly is affordability and the application process up front. But that's something you'll eventually have to go through anyway if you do a rent to own and you want to ultimately own the property.